Hello everyone and welcome to my corner of the world. I have a technique to share with you today. I think probably the camera is bouncing off the metallic embossing powder a little bit here, but if I bring it up closer you can see here it's a whitewash technique where we've combined some heat embossing with copper powder and then used white craft ink to colour in some of the flowers and then to pick out the colour of my cardstock with a little bit more ink. So I'm going to go ahead and share how I did this with you. Now I have this is a piece of crumb cake card. I find it works best with crumb cake, but you could use any other dark card. And I have heat embossed it using copper embossing powder and the Blessings of Home stamp set. So I've used this big one here and then the smaller one. And as you'll see on my card, I used this greeting here. Now I've done several videos on heat embossing, so I will put a link to that beneath my video here so that you can see how I've done that. So now I'm just going to really focus on the whitewashing technique and how I then built the card up. So you'll want to be using the Whisper White craft ink. This is quite thick. And you can see it's got on my fingers a little bit there. You'll need a plate, or you can always use one of your acrylic blocks, and you'll also need one of the water pens. Now this is one of Stampin' Up's old versions. They have introduced a new design, but I've got a bunch of these, so I'm going to carry on and use this. So the little chamber is just filled with some water, and I've already put some craft ink on my plate, you can see there. And to pick up some colour, I just pull from the main part and just pull it back a little bit. Now the water in the pen is going to wick down through the bristles. You don't need to do any squeezing. If you do, everything's going to get really wet and watery, and you won't be happy with your finished item. So as I say, I've just pulled down a little bit of ink like that. And all I'm going to do is to colour or whitewash my flowers. And if you look, by me holding it at this angle, actually makes it really clear to see where the flowers are here. And we've got leaves around here. So I'm going to colour, and I'm literally doing a wash on here. And as I said, the water is coming down the bristles, so it will get a bit watery. So you will need to reload your brush quite frequently. But you can see I'm not worrying about the lines between the petals because the embossing powder actually is like a resist, and it'll just come off just like water off of the duck's back. So you just work your way around, and I'm going to do the center of my flower here. I need a little bit more ink because it's getting a weeny bit on the watery side. Now the reason that we're not putting too much water on is partly because it takes a lot longer to dry. You do need to give it a little bit of time between doing each of the sections. But also if it gets too wet, your card will warp. And if you work it when it's too wet, you'll find that the surface starts to break down and you'll get pilling. And again, that won't give you a nice finish. So you can see I'm just working my way around, just picking out my flowers. Hopefully you can see these flowers as I'm working. I'm holding it at this angle because I find it's easier to see those flowers. And I'm also trying to make sure that I don't blind you with the glare off the embossing. So there's another flower down here. And you basically just work your way round until you've caught all your little flowers. In fact, sometimes when I work on a flower, another one just pops out. There's another one just there. Just think to yourself, well, I didn't see that a moment ago, but there it is. Okay, so I would complete that working on the other flowers until all my flowers are whitewashed. To clean your brush, you just need a piece of kitchen paper towel, and you can give it a squeeze which will run the water through the bristles, and then you'll just be able to scrub that like that and give it a little squeeze, and I find that will take all the white ink out, and also it just brings the bristles all back into a nice shape again. Now I've got one that I coloured in earlier, so it's nice and dry. So I think probably I did this one about 30 minutes or so ago. So it takes a few moments to dry. And I'm going to use fresh freesia because that's the colour of my card base. And you just need to put a tiny little blob on your plate or on your block. It goes a long way, this ink. Now if you don't have any re-inkers, you can use the method where you can squeeze your ink pad really firmly together, and then you can pick up the ink off of the pad here, off of the backing here. But I always recommend people, if you buy an ink pad, go ahead and invest in the re-inker, because you do need to top those inks up from time to time to get really good stamp impressions. So I've picked up some of my ink, and all I'm going to do now is at the base of each of my petals, I am just going to brush upwards to introduce some colour to the bottom of my petals here. And I'm having to pick up colour quite frequently, partly because it does water itself down, but also it is picking up a little bit of the white that I laid down earlier, so it is diluting it a bit. And I'm just sort of leaving, if you can see, a little sort of feathery edge to it, just to make it look a little bit more realistic. Because when you look at flowers, they don't necessarily have a solid line of colour change. So I would just work my way around. It's very relaxing if you're not on a video. And just pick out at the bottom of each of my petals. And then on my smaller flowers here, I might just sort of dab the bristles, just to bring in a bit of colour. And I might leave some of these flowers without any colour on at all, just so that the white just sort of pops out a bit more. And so you just work your way around like that. Again, making sure it doesn't get too wet, otherwise you will find that your paper starts to warp and it could start breaking down, and then you get the horrible pilling. Okay, now it might not look as though you put an awful lot of ink on. I think the camera is showing it quite dark, but from my point of view it isn't as dark as all that, but it still gives you a great impression. So I have got one that I finished and it is nice and dry, and as you can see, I'm trying to keep the glare away, as you can see, I've left all the leaves uncoloured, but the flowers I've pulled up with the white. Now I'm going to pop this on a base. This is 11 by 4 1/4, and again it's in the fresh freezer. And I want to pop this up on some Stampin' Dimensionals. Now the reason I'm using Stampin' Dimensionals here is that despite everything, the piece of card isn't quite as flat. If you can see, I'm holding it edge on here, and you can see it is a little bit warped. And if I use liquid adhesive, it might just be a little bit too wet to hold it down. And if I use Stampin' Seal, I often find that if the card is a little bit warped, then the Stampin' Seal doesn't hold it down nice and firmly. So if you have your dimensionals, it's there that, well, it will hold it in place, and you'll have a gap that you deliberately wanted to have a gap, rather than because the paper is a little bit warped. So I've got the backing off. All right, so I'm going to just line that up as best as I can, because I can't look over at the top of it because I'm frightened of getting my head in the camera. While I was heat embossing my crumb cake piece, I also heat embossed the lining. This is the bit that I'm going to write my greeting on. To you, love from me. Okay, so now we're looking as though we're a bit short on the old. Oh no, it's coming down. I haven't used this for a couple of days, and I think it's objecting to being ignored. So I was inspired with this card by Lisa Freeman. She shared with us the technique, although I have to say it's one that I have used in the past. But as with all paper crafters, we always put our own spin and choose our own colours. And I also took my greeting and I heat embossed that as well. And I just heat embossed it onto a piece of cardstock. This is 1/2 inch wide, and I'm just going to clip it with my snips just to the length that I want it. It's going to go there. And I'm going to attach this with some mini dimensionals because it's not very wide, and it means I don't have to trim or cut back any of the larger ones. So now I've just got to decide where I'm going to put it. It's a shame to cover up all my hard work, really, but never mind. And then a little bow made with the fresh freezer open weave ribbon. And if you follow the link below this video, it will take you to my blog, where you'll be able to find all the dimensions and the supplies I've used for this card. But it also have a link to my video that where I share how I do my bows. my ribbon bows. Everybody has a slightly different way of doing them, and I just find that this works for me. Basically, I tie hundreds of bows in a month, because I find myself tying bows for my ladies in my classes. And then a couple of pearls dotted around just to fill in some of my gaps. Like this, that'll do. I think that will do. And because I had all my heat embossing supplies out, I even went ahead and heat embossed my envelope as well. So there's my card using the whitewash technique. Once again, thanking Lisa Freeman for her inspiration. I so hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, go ahead and give me a little thumbs up. If you don't already do so, subscribe to my channel, and then you'll get a notice every time I release a new video. Well, that's it for today. Thank you very much for joining me. Bye for now.